Intro music fades in and out. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a story you think you know, but trust me, you don't know the half of it. We're talking about the Titanic, the legendary unsinkable ship. We've all seen the movie. We all know the story of the iceberg. But what if I told you that the iceberg was just the final blow in a long chain of failures, cover-ups, and shocking decisions? What if the real story is far more complex and, frankly, more scandalous than you've ever been led to believe? Forget what you've seen on the big screen. In the next 10 minutes, we're going to uncover the truth they never told you about the Titanic. So, let's set the scene. April 14th, 1912. The North Atlantic, the brand new state-of-the-art RMS Titanic is slicing through the icy water on its maiden voyage. It's a floating palace, a symbol of human ingenuity. But in the wireless radio room, a critical story is unfolding that most passengers are completely unaware of. Throughout that day, the Titanic's radio operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, were receiving multiple, increasingly urgent ice warnings from other ships in the area. The Masaba, the Californian, the Baltic, all of them sent messages pinpointing massive ice fields directly in the Titanic's path. So why didn't Captain Smith alter course? Here's the first shocking truth. Many of those warnings never even reached him. The radio operators were employed by the Marconi Company, not the White Star Line. Their primary job wasn't to relay safety messages. It was to send and receive personal telegrams for the wealthy first-class passengers. On that night, the wireless system had been down and was just repaired. Phillips was swamped with a backlog of passenger messages. When a crucial ice warning came in from the SS Californian, whose position was so close they could practically see each other, a stressed-out Phillips reportedly replied, "Shut up, I am busy." He was working the Marconi traffic. That final critical warning was never passed to the bridge. The ship was steaming full speed ahead, blind to the danger that lay just minutes away. Now let's talk about the ship itself. Unsinkable. That was the word used in the press, a marketing term that the White Star Line never officially used but certainly didn't discourage. It created a dangerous sense of complacency. But was she really built to be unsinkable? The design featured 16 watertight compartments. The idea was that the ship could stay afloat even if 4 of these compartments flooded. A brilliant design on paper. However, there was a fatal flaw. The watertight bulkheads, the walls separating these compartments, didn't reach all the way up to the main deck. They only went up to E-deck. Think of it like an ice cube tray. If you pour water into one section and you keep pouring, it will eventually spill over into the next, and the next, and the next. When the iceberg gashed the side of the hull, it didn't create one big hole. It buckled the steel plates, popping rivets and creating a series of smaller openings along a 300-foot stretch, flooding the first 6 compartments. 6, 2 more than the design could handle. As the bow dipped, water from the flooded compartments began to spill over the tops of those bulkheads, just like in our ice cube tray analogy, sealing the ship's fate. It wasn't a matter of if she would sink, but how fast. The unsinkable ship was doomed by a fundamental design choice made to maximize passenger space on the upper decks. And this brings us to another dark secret: the materials. For years, historians and scientists have debated the quality of the steel and the rivets used to build the Titanic. Some studies suggest the steel plates were brittle in the freezing temperatures of the North Atlantic, making them more likely to fracture on impact rather than bend. More damning, though, is the evidence surrounding the 3 million rivets holding the ship together. Metallurgical analysis of rivets recovered from the wreck site has shown that they contained a high concentration of Dale slag, a byproduct of smelting. This made the rivets weaker and more prone to popping out under stress, So why use substandard rivets? It likely came down to cost and availability. In the rush to build the world's largest ship, corners may have been cut, sacrificing strength for speed of construction. The ship's weak points were literally built into its very bones. As the ship began its final plunge, the chaos and horror we've seen in movies was very real. But what about the lifeboats? This is perhaps the most infuriating part of the tragedy. The Titanic actually carried more lifeboats than was legally required at the time. The problem was the laws were horrendously outdated. They were based on a ship's tonnage, not its passenger capacity. So while the Titanic had lifeboats for about 178 people, there were over 2,200 souls on board. Less than half had a chance of survival from the start. But it gets worse. In the panic and confusion, many of the lifeboats that were launched were only half full. Crew members were poorly trained in their deployment, and many passengers, lulled into a false sense of security by the unsinkable myth, were reluctant to leave the seeming safety of the massive ship for a tiny boat in the middle of the freezing ocean. The first lifeboat launched, Lifeboat 7, had a capacity of 65 but left with only 28 people. Lifeboat 1, with a capacity of 40, left with just 12. Hundreds of potential spots were wasted. Once in the water, most of these lifeboats, fearing they would be swamped, refused to return to pick up the hundreds of people struggling in the water. Only one boat, commanded by 5th Officer Harold Lowe, went back. By then, it was mostly too late. And what about the captain? Captain Edward Smith was a veteran, the Millionaire's captain, on his final voyage before retirement. His legacy is one of the biggest debates surrounding the disaster. Did he order the ship to maintain its dangerously high speed to make headlines with an early arrival in New York? Or was he simply following standard practice for the era, a practice that hadn't yet caught up to the reality of modern, faster ships? His final moments are shrouded in mystery. Some say he locked himself on the bridge and went down with his ship. Others claim to have seen him in the water, helping others before succumbing to the cold. We will never know for sure, but his command that night has been scrutinized for over a century. The pressure from the White Star Line's chairman, J. Bruce Eyes May, who was on board and reportedly pushed for the ship to go faster, adds another layer to this corporate puzzle. Was the captain a victim of hubris, or was he a victim of corporate pressure? Finally, there's the enduring mystery of the SS Californian, the ship that was stopped in the ice just miles away, the ship whose radio operator was told to shut up. The crew of the Californian saw the Titanic's distress rockets, but their captain, Stanley Lord, made a fateful and controversial decision. He interpreted them not as distress signals, but as company signals or fireworks. He chose to wait until morning. By the time his radio operator woke up and learned of the disaster, the Titanic was already at the bottom of the ocean. Could the Californian have saved hundreds, if not all, of the people who ended up in the water? The British and American inquiries both condemned Captain Lord, but he and his supporters maintained his innocence until his death. This debate continues to divide historians to this very day. So the sinking of the Titanic wasn't just a story of an iceberg. It was a perfect storm of human error, corporate greed, outdated regulations, and fatal design flaws. Ignored warnings, a flawed, unsinkable design, substandard materials, an insufficient number of lifeboats, and a nearby ship that failed to respond. Any one of these things could have been changed, and history would be different. The tragedy could have been prevented at so many turns. The 500 lives lost that night weren't just victims of an accident. They were victims of a system that failed them from top to bottom. The story of the Titanic is not just a tragedy. It's a cautionary tale that still resonates today. What do you think? Do you believe the blame lies more with the captain, the ship's builders, or the company owners? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I read every single one. And if you found this deep dive into history as fascinating as I did, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that uncover the truth. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.